Welcome back to this week's episode, and I am joined by my woo-woo friends. Rachel, in our last episode that we recorded, brought up getting all of our woo-woo friends together to talk about woo-woo things. And so here we are to talk about Kabbalah, because all of us have taken some interest in this over the last, I'd say, year and a half. Some have gone pretty deep into studying Kabbalah and practicing Kabbalah. And I just thought this would be a great opportunity to bring together three lovely ladies to talk about this and share what your experience with Kabbalah is. So let's maybe start with some information about what exactly Kabbalah is.
Yes, so I'll start. The Kabbalah is the study of Jewish mysticism, and it's really about exploring the nature of the universe, the divine, and the human soul. And interestingly enough, like it is tied in with quantum physics and a lot of really interesting science as well. So that at a basic level is what Kabbalah is.
Okay. I would also say that like kind of the main focus or tenet to this is reducing reactivity, right? It's looking at the things in our lives that trigger us, that cause reaction in us. And that gives us an indication of what our tikkun is, which, Susan, what is a tikkun?
Yes, so tikkun is the Hebrew term for a correction. So basically, not to get too deep into it, but essentially it's based on reincarnation. And Kabbalistic wisdom is based in reincarnation, that before we were born into this world, we had picked our life circumstances. So we picked our parents, we picked our life path, and all of the experiences that we would experience along the way in order to correct something, right? So there is something, and usually it's not just one thing. There's oftentimes one major thing that we are here on this earth to correct, but then there's a lot of other subcategories as well. For example, if my tikkun or my correction was patience, right? I am going to decide the parents that I want to be born into that is going to teach me to increase my sense of patience, right? So that I can leave this world knowing that correction has been made, and then I can move on and up level into my new reincarnation, right? Where I don't necessarily need to focus so much on patience anymore. I can focus on something else, right? And it's about digging through all of the different layers. So again, it's not just one thing, but the idea behind Kabbalah is if you do come on this earth with your tikkun and you do not correct it, that you are having to correct it in your next life on some level.
Gotcha. So it almost seems like a Groundhog's Day thing. Like you keep coming back to fix the same thing like over and over and over again. When I was first learning about tikkun, it almost kind of came up to me. I know that this reference may not make a lot of sense to a lot of people out there, but I know it will to the three of you. Like it's almost like your gremlin message, right? This thing that keeps kind of controlling the script. And until you correct that script, it's going to keep showing up in your life. As far as the tikkuns go, I know that we have several of them, but in this lifetime, are you only correcting one, or can you correct multiple tikkuns in this lifetime? Like you can be expanding into that next level within this life.
Exactly. So you can correct one tikkun and other tikkuns pop up. I know I've had this conversation with a few of you, right? Like I had patience is mine. And I feel like, oh, now I've worked a lot on that. Now I have like 3 or 4 more other ones. And we're always moving into, this is another concept, sort of when we correct into a different movie, right? Like once we start to do the right things, make the right decisions, we're starting to expand ourselves. And we're not working on that as much anymore because we've passed through it. I don't know if anyone else would have anything to add to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also a lot of the tikkuns I feel are also tied into the same things. Meaning you've got the one major overarching one, and they're really all just plugged into it in some way, and so as different things start coming up and you feel like I've worked on this other thing already, you realize that, oh wait, I'm still reacting in a way that kind of harkens back to my old tikkun, that thing that I thought that I had worked on. I would say for me, my judgment, my one of my major tikkun, and there are plenty, is judgment, right? Astrology is a thing in Kabbalah, and I'm a Virgo Kabbalistically, and also just in the general sun sign kind of thing. And let's not get too deep in the weeds in that, but people who come in as Virgos, judgment tends to be a big issue, judgment of others, but also judgment of oneself. And can be a very judgmental person of others, but certainly of myself as well. And I find that a lot of times any other things that keep popping up tend to come right back to me judging a person, judging a situation, but not judging a situation so that I know how to respond to it, judging a situation in a way that I am casting judgment on, the person, the thing, or whatever is happening. And so having self-awareness is so important in order to realize, oh, this is that same old thing that keeps coming up that I still have to keep working on.
Gotcha. Yep. That makes a ton of sense. So I kind of want, now we can just kind of jump into everybody's kind of personal experiences. When you think about what brought you to Kabbalah, what piqued your interest in Kabbalah? How did you kind of learn about this and decide that you wanted to start studying and practicing Kabbalah?
I tell Elaine, and she always nods like no. She's my soul teacher. Elaine, her soul is always like, I think like a couple months ahead of mine in all things. Elaine's introduced me to a lot of things that have impacted my life in a lot of incredible ways, and the way my business has gone and the things I'm doing. But Elaine and I have been talking about sort of this feeling about finances and money and all the stuff that gets caught up when you're in a business, and my worthiness and all that stuff. And we all have these things. And she sent me this episode on prosperity that she had listened to. She said, you have to listen to this. And it was the KabbalahCenter.com, one of the teachers, the Kabbalists. And I was just like, oh, this is amazing. I needed to sign up and do it. And so, yeah, Elaine was the one who introduced me to Kabbalah a couple months after she did it. And I've been fortunate to make it through Kabbalah 4, and I'm now like wrapping back around and doing it all over again. And it has fundamentally changed who I am and how I show up in this world every single moment of every day, more than it's been building for a long time, but this has been one of a major shift for me in my life in such a positive and incredible way that I think has made me a better person, showing up better for myself and others.
What would be like an example, if you were to expand on that, like a specific way that you've noticed this has had a positive impact in who you are, or how you move through this world?
Just tikkun for one, knowing what it is and recognizing my reactivity, like how I was showing up in circumstances and my reactivity, and realizing like when it's the way they teach it and you learn it, and that aha, and you talked about it a little bit before, like say, for example, my spouse, he lays into me about saying, we're in an argument, but what happens, and then how I respond in that argument, and then having those moments of like, oh, I'm not doing what they talk about in Kabbalah, like pause, what a pleasure. Why is this in my movie? And what is so fascinating is when I started to do that, circumstances changed. Like his attitude would then completely change. The results were fine, better, much, arguments stopped happening. Like real communication started to happen ahead of time. And that's to talk about that type of change. Like just the wisdom that it brings you has allowed me to have that awareness and stop things before they start so we can move them in the right direction. And it has changed my life. And that's just one of many examples.
You bring up one of the first concepts that we learned about in Kabbalah, and that's pause, what a pleasure. Who wants to explain what that is?
Susan, go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Go for it.
So pause, what a pleasure is based on your tikkun. So essentially, we have experiences in life where we are going to feel negative emotions pretty much every day. Our emotions go up and down. But the idea behind it is when we feel a negative emotion, right, we can be either reactive or responsive. So if we're reactive, we're going to have some negative situation happen, a negative feeling, and then we're going to respond in a negative way that keeps us in this negative cycle, right? The pause, what a pleasure, and funny how they describe it that way. It's like, well, if something happens in a circumstance, we're going to pause, we're going to take a minute, we're going to take a beat. Now, that could be a beat that lasts 5 seconds or a year or whatever it is. But the idea is we don't want to react from this place of annoyance, anger, whatever negative space. We want to be able to pause. We want to be able to respond in a way that serves us and certainly serves other people. Right. So you might have, I was just telling a story, very basic level, like when I am working out, I do Orange Theory Fitness, right? And we have treadmills and rowers, and I'm on the rower, and it's the middle of the workout, and the coach is talking and telling us what to do. And there's 2 people on the treadmill that are talking through class all the time, right? And I'm sitting there and I'm having to endure this. Right. And so my thought is, how dare they interrupt, right? They're interrupting my workout. I cannot focus, and it's very external, right? So I'm putting a lot of blame externally. And so what happens is I get annoyed inside, right? So then what I have to do in that moment is pause. And the reason why I say what a pleasure is because that's my opportunity to actually be introspective and look at what's really going on with me. Why am I having this reaction? Not the fact that they are behaving in the way that they're behaving. So it really, really helps me to take responsibility for whatever my response is going to be. And I can think through that. And again, one of the things, I won't get too deep because it goes into all the different levels, but one of the things they talk about is like, oh, well, what if it's something that is so strong, you just feel like it's just not fair. It's like it's injustice. It's a terrible thing happening in the world, right? Can't you confront? Shouldn't you confront? And the idea behind it is, no, you need to actually get yourself to a point where you feel completely neutral about the situation before you can actually approach and have any sort of a conversation about it, which is way harder than it sounds.
As he brings this point up a lot of times throughout the Kabbalah one, where he's like, those people that got you to be reactive, those 2 ladies on the treadmill won't stop talking, were literally put there for that reason, to like trigger you so that you could see, this is my tikkun, this is the correction that I need to make.
This is something that I'm being asked to correct. Mm-hmm. And so I have to do that introspective work to figure out why I put this in my movie or why I put this in my story. Yeah. And I'll be honest, that's something I'm actually working on, that particular area, right? Because my reaction wants to be, shut up, ladies. That's not gonna serve me or them.
Right.
And one of the things that they say too is if you don't correct it, it's going to keep appearing in your life until you do. So I have to laugh at Susan's example, because I run into that all the time, and I'm still working on the what a pleasure. I forget to do it, and it's like one of the basic tenets. But so for example, when I first went to in-person Kabbalah class, I just kind of sat wherever, and because whatever, I just sat wherever, and I ended up at this table as I was the first one there, and all these people came, and they were all these ladies who were speaking a different language, and they were all their phones were going off, and they would talk to each other while the teacher was, oh my God. And I'm sitting there like, why did I sit here? This is so annoying. Like that whole thing. And the whole time I'm not there, right? I'm just, whatever. And I keep forgetting in Kabbalah class to pause, and then I will have another situation where I go somewhere else and there's someone who is talking over people or not paying attention, or like, and it happens to me over and over and over again, because clearly I haven't worked on that. And what is that? That's all judgments. That's all part of my tikkun, but it's going to keep coming up over and over again until I really examine it and get past it. So it's the kind of thing, like they say, if you're experiencing something over and over and over again, you really have to look at that. And what is it that you are doing or not doing that's bringing that into your life, and what are you not correcting, right? And so, yeah. I just thinking about it still, though.
I would say too, because people, like all of us who've coached, right, who all coach as well, like ourselves, but clients who keep running into the same relationship issues, the same financial, but like the same, like we do this, like it just keeps coming up, whether it's a Kabbalah concept or not, but we've all been in that space where, why do I keep picking the same type of people, or why do I keep attracting these things? Like, your energy, and I think this is a really cool part about Kabbalah, it's like they believe in energy, and your energy is going to attract the things. So what kind of energy are you putting out there? And if anything, that pause really creates that mindfulness of like how much judgment we have, how much is coming up for us, but there's so much power in the pause. And I do want to say it's not about being a doormat either and just letting people and situations happen, but there's so much power in that, and not reacting to certain things and just, working through them on yourself. Incredible.
Yeah, I would have to say, like, when I first started going through Kabbalah 1, I was like, well, so, okay, so pause, what a pleasure. Always turn it back on myself. Okay, great way to end up being like a people pleaser, letting people just run all over you. And I think it's just because you don't get into the how to have confrontation, proactive confrontation, until you get to Kabbalah 2. So it's not like confrontation is not ever a part of your life and you just pause, what a pleasure, everything away. I think that it's just that's building that foundation, getting to where that becomes second nature, and working on like bringing those core tenets into your day-to-day life, so that when you do start when you're ready to expand out and take these new learnings and teachings in, that you've already got this solid foundation, this basis. And I love that he says, like, even if you have to fake the what a pleasure part, just fake it, because it's still trying, right? You're still trying to practice this. You're still like letting the light in a little bit into this, so even sometimes, and it is hard sometimes, because you're like, there's nothing pleasurable about this situation whatsoever. But I like the way that you phrase that, Susan. It's the opportunity. I now have the opportunity to look at this and to make a correction, because otherwise this is going to keep showing up in my life over and over and over again. Rachel or Elaine, go ahead.
What I was going to say too is it's one of the things that attracted me to Kabbalah when I started. I had always heard about Kabbalah. Obviously, I heard about Madonna in the 90s or whenever it was, and she walked around with her red string, but I didn't know anything about Kabbalah. And it was one of those things. I was at a very low point, and there was an ad on Instagram, and it was the pause course. It was really Kabbalah 1, but they weren't calling it Kabbalah 1. They're calling it pause course, I think, just to kind of get people in. And interestingly enough, by the way, they don't call it, in pause, they didn't say what a pleasure. They said what an opportunity. I think there was some rebranding happening,
Gotcha.
to get people in. And anyway, but one of the things, and I still love about Kabbalah, is that it's so practical. These are, we're all coaches, and like Rachel was saying, like, these are things that we talk about with our clients, why things are coming up over and over again, what, all, these things that we examine. And a lot of people can look at that. It's like, well, I mean, it's not like that's new. Like, first of all, Kabbalah is not new. It's like thousands of years old, but it's just practical. Like it's things that you can practically bring into your life, in order to make you better. It's not just about believing in, a deity and, this whole structure or whatever. I mean, yes, it's part of Judaism. It's, but it's all about how to practically make your life better. And I think that is a beautiful thing. And that really attracted me. This is one of the reasons why I stayed. And another thing that really kept me there was, by the way, let's say for the people listening, you keep saying he, and he is David Guillaume, and he is the teacher of the on-demand Kabbalah course that's on Kabbalah.com. Which is not sponsored. We're not sponsored by them.
We're not sponsored by them.
Yeah. This is my podcast too, but but anyway, it was one of the things that David said was, if you hear something that I'm, teaching you or whatever, and it doesn't resonate, take what works for you and leave the rest. And I grew up Catholic, and that's certainly not something that I ever heard. How many religions tell you that you don't have to believe everything that you're told by whoever is, your priest or your rabbi or whoever. And it was just so, and that just really made me feel like, okay, this is kind of home. This is where I belong. And so I have stayed.
The common thread between all three of you is that you at one point have practiced in Catholicism, have left Catholicism, and have, I guess, in a sense, been seeking since then. Although, Susan, you became Jewish when you were pregnant with your son. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yes, I am a recovering Catholic.
I hear that a lot.
Yes, and I became agnostic after becoming a recovering Catholic. So by the time I got to college, I was an agnostic. I met my husband who's Jewish, and we had decided to raise our children Jewish. And so according to Judaism, the mother needs to be Jewish in order for the children to be Jewish. So I converted when I was 8 months pregnant with my first son. But like everybody else is saying, like even with Judaism, although I resonated more with Judaism certainly than I did with Catholicism, but Kabbalah, to Elaine's point, is very much a practical application of spiritual growth. And I think I consider myself more a spiritualist than a religious person.
Do you think that it was maybe the lack of practicality of Catholicism why you felt like you didn't resonate with it so much, or that it wasn't applicable to all these areas of your life? And that's why there was a kind of a desire to detach from that?
Yeah, I think that it was very rigid and very rule oriented. Mortal sin, confession, things like this. It's like, if you do this, you must confess. If you do this, it means it's a sin. There are different levels of sin, but it's all sin. And you need to repent. Like all of this fear-based stuff. And I listen, I know a lot of people who are Catholic and who very much connect with the religion, and I don't want to poo-poo the religion, but for me, that did not work for me at all. I'm much more about spirituality, spiritual growth, personal growth. Even before I knew what that was as a child, that's who I was. I was somebody who valued personal growth. But I didn't see Catholicism as an outlet for that.
Yeah. Ladies, you want to expand on your thoughts about leaving Catholicism?
Yeah, so I was raised and actually studied theology and religious studies in college. So I have a degree in that and spent a lot of years very committed to Catholicism. For me, I just kept getting stuck on like, for me, that like women were always just seen as lesser than. And so that just sort of sat in the back with me. I actually wrote a dissertation on the silencing of women in the church. Like it always sort of sat in the back, and it came to the front probably 4 years ago, where for me, I could no longer sort of sit in a space where the dissonance was there, right? Like, how could I sit and pretend to be here when I'm really not here, and finding it valuable? And when I left Catholicism, I wasn't really searching for anything. Like, I was fine. Like Susan, I was on a spiritual journey. Let the universe and the flowers and the wind or whatever. I'm just going to do whatever, right? I wasn't actually seeking out anything. And when that sort of came into my space, it was like, it's more of a way of being. You could be any religion and study Kabbalah. It's just a beautiful way of being. And I don't see the hypocrisy or the dissonance. Like anyone that I talk to who studies Kabbalah, like there's a general understanding versus, and this is any really, like you go to church or synagogue and you pray, and then you leave, and then you're cursing people out, and like you're being an awful person, and like people just are where they are, regardless of religion or where they are. And I loved Kabbalah because it was just like, this is just a beautiful way to be and to exist in this world that encompasses, I think, the best parts of a lot of religions that are out there, how we treat each other, like the good things that they really want their people to do. But I think it comes across in a very, as Susan said, sort of rigid, you're going to go to hell. Like, or if you don't do, I'm like, really? Like, you're telling me, like, you human being telling me that exactly like how is your connection to God any different than my connection to a God? Like, do I need you to interpret God for me? Like, all those sort of things.
Yeah, all valid points. When we talk about Kabbalah, it's a spiritual practice. And I think spirituality is one of those words that people cringe a little bit, because they're like, oh, we're going to talk about religion, because a lot of people tie spirituality to that. Then there's the people that hear spirituality and they think of like the woo-woo people, and they're like, I don't want anything to do with your universe and spirituality and all things woo. I think it has a very different definition for everybody. Since this episode will be put underneath the spiritual pillar, I'm just kind of wondering, and we can start wherever, but I do kind of want to hear from everybody. What does spirituality mean to you?
Spirituality to me is sort of that journey into self and how we find that in conjunction with everything else that's going on in the world. And that's for me what's very like whatever it is that helps me to be a better human being, to learn more about who I am, to show up in the fullness of who I am, and allows me to think and learn and take new concepts. And how do I incorporate that into just being a better person, a better human being?
Elaine, did you want to add anything?
So for me, with spirituality, it's very hard for me to define because it's always evolving for me. So for years, I didn't want anything to do with anything spiritual, quote unquote, right? I had disavowed myself from Catholicism, but didn't really feel like I needed to do anything else, and just was very much looked down on people, judgment, who felt that need, right? Oh, they had to have to believe in something. Why can't you just live your life and what have you? But there was always something there pulling me. I was never willing to just call myself a atheist, or you just wanted to give myself some wiggle room, and so I called myself an agnostic. But something just pulled, and I think it was part of my coaching journey that helped me to really connect with that part of myself that really needs something more, that really wants something more. So for me, spirituality really is about connection. It's connection to myself, connection to the things that we cannot define or see, knowing that there is something more, or at least feeling that there is something more. And I can't describe what that thing is, but it's a need to connect with it, because connecting with that and connecting with myself is connecting with everything and everyone who I come across or who I don't come across. It's just about, connecting with everything. So that's spirituality to me, is about connection.
Susan?
Yeah. For me, spirituality is, like Elaine said, very much about connection. That, first of all, this concept of God, right? I don't necessarily believe that there is a God, but Kabbalah says that there is what's called the light of the creator. And to me, what that means is it's energy, and it's energy that I'm inviting in or I'm pushing away. And the thing is, I also believe that everything happens for a reason. And that can be a very deep concept for a lot of people. So it's like, oh, these horrible things are happening. You could think about what's happening in Israel and all of that kind of thing, like anything. And how can you say that this is happening for a reason, right? I don't understand exactly what that reason is, and that's part of the faith that I'm needing to embody. But that trust that it is happening, but then also, what does that mean for me, right? And so, kind of, to me, and I think my definition of spirituality has evolved in the way it puts me in choice of what energy I'm willing to accept and take on and take ownership, and what energy I am willing to put on the wayside, right? And so again, it's very difficult to define spirituality, but I really do believe that it is very much of, I have been asked to live this life, and I have decided that these are the things that I'm going to experience, and this is the reason, and it's my job spiritually to figure that out as I go along.
This isn't exactly part of the same question, but it's something that Susan said, just brought this up, is for me, Kabbalah has given me some comfort in that. We mentioned before that one of the beliefs is that our soul chooses what body to come in, when to come in, who our parents are going to be, the whole thing. And that our soul chose this life because it was going to be the life that was going to trigger the cocoon that we needed to overcome. So the parents were going to do that, the people we came across, what we believe about all of those kinds of things. And that made me able to accept more of my childhood. Because I thought, well, that certainly triggered all these different things. And it made me look at my parents differently. Obviously they're here on their own journey. And part of that journey was also to trigger this thing in me. It was like a job that they had to do. That probably sounds ridiculous, but it made me go like, well, if that was what was meant to happen, then I can look at them much more I can be more empathetic to them. I can understand them better. And it can help me move on from that kind of pain and resentment that has been a lifelong struggle for me. It's still something that I'm working on, but it just helped cast a different light on, the early part of my life. And I'm really grateful for that because it's something that I really struggled with. And yeah, and so that's something that is really, really connected to in Kabbalah, and spiritually actually just lightened me a little bit.
I will say this just to tag onto Elaine for the listeners here, because some people have had atrocious childhoods, that they do go into explain a little bit more deeply, like why would I choose to come into like this? And so not to get into that here, but just if there are people listening, like who've had something very awful, that they do explain much deeper about why and what's going on, so that there are answers to that.
And I think it's comfort. I think that's a great word for it, because I do think it is kind of comforting to realize that it's like, okay, these things happened for a reason. And sometimes you don't see that right initially, but I think even futuristically, we spend so much time and energy trying to control what is going to happen in our lives and like worrying about the things that haven't happened in our lives. And the Kabbalah, it was very comforting for me to say, like, this is all predetermined. Like, you can stop worrying about this because what's going to happen is just going to happen. Like, it's going to play out. And I certainly don't want this to turn into a discussion about free will, because that could, again, dive down a pretty deep rabbit hole. But really the only free will that you have is to react or to be proactive and respond. That's the only choice that you have to make, because everything else is already determined. Which in a sense, at first when I heard that, I was like, well, that just takes away my agency. But no, your agency is in the choice to not react, is in the choice to make the correction. That's where you have the agency, because you don't have agency over other people, circumstances, anything like that. As much as we feel like we'd love to have that, it's really not, it's non-existent. Hard truth. But what changes have you noticed in your life? Rachel, you kind of touched on this a little bit, some of the things that you've noticed. What changes have you guys seen in your life since you started practicing and studying Kabbalah?
My anxiety level has reduced tremendously. My tikkun is actually righteous indignation. That's one of the bigger ones. And I developed so much anxiety around that before I found the Kabbalah. And talk about judgment. I mean, like, I was judging in a way that was very protective too, right? Like, the righteous indignation comes from, there's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. I'm definitely a natural rule follower. I think I was raised that way. But at the same time, I think that was in me, and probably something that I brought over from other lives. I would say, and the thing is, when you study Kabbalah, they do talk about how, like, if you can correct as you go along in this life, that blessings will happen. For me, it hasn't even been about blessings per se. It's been about feeling more calm, feeling more grounded, feeling more in control of myself, right? And so the fact that I used to say I wear anxiety like a third arm, like it was just so a part of me, and now my anxiety is very much situational. So I think that has been the most profound impact for me.
I'm very much still on the journey. I mean, we're all still on the journey, but I Well, like what I said before, it has helped me put perspective on my life, which was really important because I was really drowning in resentment for really all of it. I was really drowning in resentment. And that it, resentment, they say, is drinking poison, hoping the other person dies, and it was just so poisonous. It really, really was. And so it helped to pull me out of that a bit. Again, I'm still working on it. So reflexively, that's the default, right? And so I'm always working on getting away from that. Every once in a while, there's some backsliding and then, having to remember what I have learned. But what it has given me is really foundation. And I'm not always the best at going back and doing what a pleasure and all that, but when I do remember, it helps me to stop. It helps me to turn off those voices in my head that just go, 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 and just be able to come back to self and plug in also. Right. So still working on, I'm making that kind of more, man, doing that more than I have been, but it's been really helpful so far.
Mm-hmm. What concept do you feel like you've learned in Kabbalah that most resonated with you?
Well, for me, it's the thing that I talked about. It's choosing your life. Why is this in my movie is another one.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the things that I always told clients or whatever is, particularly when feeling something, when you're feeling a reaction, and it's kind of the same thing, but I would always stop and tell myself, like, what's really going on here, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is really happening? What is really at the core of this anger, this resentment, this jealousy, or whatever, however I'm reacting in that moment? I guess it's a little bit of a pause too, as I was doing before, but why is this in my movie? Again, is a way for me to put things into perspective. And there was an author, and I can't remember his name now. He's very, very famous. He wrote a book, I Can See Clearly Now. And the book, he was talking about certain circumstances in his life and how he felt at the moment. And now looking back and seeing, oh, that's why that all happened. Because if that didn't happen, this wouldn't happen. And so why is this in my movie is my way of doing that now instead of later, so that I can correct in the moment. Or at least understand. If I'm not in the mental space to correct in the moment, at least I understand what is happening, so that when I come down off of whatever that I'm feeling, I can actually apply these different things that I've learned and be able to have that perspective moving forward.
Yeah. I think it was interesting because I think there was a girl in Kabbalah one that she like brought up the question of like, well, what about hormones? Like once you get to a certain state, like your hormones are now at play. You've got neurotransmitters that are going like crazy. You don't have control over those. And in a sense, that's what the pause is for, is to let all of those level back out again. If you can bring yourself back down to baseline from that, and hormones aren't playing a part in the reaction, then you're taking them out of the equation.
I think the best concept for me, because patience is a big tikkun, is always be giving, the ABG, to like be the light, like to come from a giving place. And I find this most like when I'm in situations where someone's like maybe droning on about something, and like I feel like, don't they realize that I have like, and just to hold space in a moment with somebody who needs that at that moment, and just come from a giving space in any interaction. So whether I'm talking to someone that is clearly unaware that like this conversation should have been over a while ago, if it's something with work, if there's, when I'm, I own my own business, and so I need to go out and seek work. And am I seeking to intend to receive, or am I going out there with a place of coming from a place of wanting to give, right? And that concept has been really helpful for me to, when I think about my perspective when I'm approaching things, to come from more of a giving space. But I pause with a pleasure all day long, so that's just sort of no more for me. But always be giving. That's something it's been very powerful, and I consistently want to work at, and it's helped me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd love to add to what Rachel just said. So true that like, it's interesting when we're all describing what spirituality is to us. connection is sort of a big theme, right? So it's like, that's what our souls want. Our souls want us to connect. Our souls want us to give. But what happens when we are in a space where we need to pause, we are isolating, we are disconnecting. And to me, it is very much about refinding the connection, right? Like one of the things I was thinking about even recently is like, you know, let's say you have a coworker at work, right? And if my value, let's say, is I have a value of responsibility, right? And so I have a coworker who is not delivering what they say they are going to deliver on. That gets me to a place where I'm angry and resentful and all of this kind of thing. When I pause, when I take that objective step back and I actually see it from a higher view, what that helps me do is not be so narrow in. It helps me to see the bigger picture, which then really kind of pushes me towards that connection, right? So it's like, for me, I know when I'm isolating, that's when I need to pause, because my soul will always want to connect 100% of the time, whether it be giving, whether it be communication, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's been one of my more recent epiphanies, I think, with Kabbalah. That's been super helpful for me.
And I think it's, oh, sorry.
I was
No,
just
I
gonna
was
say,
gonna say, I was gonna say, I'd be interested to know, and I don't know, maybe this isn't the right place for it, but like the concept, which is really important, how we take quick energy from people
mm,
and situations, how often we do that. I still am learning that, you know, how often I try to take quick energy, like my husband, oh, did you
Mhm.
notice my haircut? Like, and how, like those little things, that's a work in progress.
yeah,
But how I'm connecting with myself so that I'm not looking for connection, like looking for other people to create that connection, that energy for me. I love what you said, Susan.
Mhm.
Everybody else thinks about that, taking energy.
I think you're right. I think we don't realize how often we actually are doing that. And again, this is like this, I was sharing with you guys before we started recording, that it's like, when you learn about Tikkun and then you start bringing that into your awareness. Okay. Like anytime I get reactive, like what's coming up, like what's the correction that I need to make? You start noticing, at least I notice, I'm like just one big reactive ball to like everything. There's so many little things that irk me, that just like, nothing that gets me really like blown up mad, not like family. But there's just these little small, like almost microaggressions right through my day that just like, that just like rubs me the wrong way. And so then I notice, I'm like, gosh, how much work do I really have to do here? Because there's all these things. And I think that it's same thing with the inner, like taking energy, or quick hits of energy until you learn about it. And then you start to pay attention to how often am I doing it and how often are other people doing it. You don't really realize that it's like, we're doing this all the time.
Yeah, I think it's something that we all do, all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And becoming aware of it is really important. And it's the whole thing of why am I doing this? Why do I need validation or whatever in this moment? It can be very powerful when you realize how often, you do it, or how often you realize how often you are reactive, constant reactive. And one of the things that I wanted to add to Rachel's thing about ABC, always be giving, always be get ABG. Yes. Anyway, I went to a conference last year, and with the goal of speaking to as many people as possible, and in order to get some clients for my business, and especially to be able to book some speeches in order to get clients for my business. So I went to my Kabbalah teacher and I asked him, how can I come from a giving place? Because obviously I have this thing inside of me of, I need, it's like in chorus line, I really need this job. Like I really need these clients, right? So you need to go into that and just kind of, take, what can you give me? What can you give me? And I said, how can I come from a giving place? And he said, just basically going into these situations and thinking about, what are you bringing to them? Like, what is the thing that you are bringing to the conversation, to the relationship, what have you, that is also giving to them? What do you want to them to take from it that has nothing to do with what they can give you? Which was really, really powerful. So I did that, and I had these different conversations, and it was always like, come from a giving place. And it turned out that every single conversation I had led me to something that helped me with my business, helped me book a speech or what have you. And it was just amazing to me that when I applied that, taking the self part of it out and doing the connection, really connecting, that it was kind of like miracles happened, right? It was really quite amazing to experience that in real time. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Rachel, because I totally forgot about that. But it's powerful stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Susan, you're kind of like what you were touching on was a great segue into the kind of the pre-conversation we were having before we jumped onto the podcast, where I had the question of how do you discern between a values conflict and something that might be your cocoon? And so this one word has come up from several people for me in the last few months is justice. That I'm always seeking this sense of like equality, fairness, and that it is a trigger, and I do get reactive when I feel like there's not justice being served, or things aren't being handled in a fair and equitable way. And it's shown up at work, and it's shown up in my personal life with my family. And as I was listening to some of the classes last night, it was like, ooh, I just wrote that off as like a values conflict, where it's like, I just need to make sure that I'm not putting myself in the situations where that value is getting challenged on a consistent basis, right? Or like as much as possible. And then I had the thought, I was like, but wait, what if that's a cocoon? What if that's like, this keeps happening and this keeps coming up, because that's the correction that I need to make, is around justice and fairness. And so in that situation, instead of removing myself from the situation, no, I want to be in that, because those are giving me the opportunities to make that correction. So just kind of wondering if anybody else has thoughts around that. Like, how would you discern between the two, or are they the same and maybe just values conflicts are an opportunity for us to notice maybe what our cocoon might be?
I have something to say around that. And this is sort of a new concept that we haven't talked about that is very much about Kabbalah, the concept of Satan. So Satan is actually your ego. And we are all born not only with a soul, but with an ego. And the ego is very loud, whereas the soul is very soft. So the ego was going to tell you 100% of the time, that's not fair. You need to take this action in order to ensure there is justice and there is fairness, right? And so to Rachel's point, that's all about energy, right? So it's an energy that's a dopamine hit for your brain. So we are actually pre-wired to have this little Satan on our shoulder telling us very loudly what we need to be doing in this moment to make sure things are fair, right? But when you think about actually taking Satan and putting him aside for a moment and thinking in terms of, how can I come from a giving place? How can I connect in this? Which is not going to be the quick answer for you. The quick answer is going to be, it's going to be a lot of things, but it's also going to be very reactive. The harder answer is, how do I come from a giving place? And actually, how do I connect in this moment? Which is very, very different than what your Satan wants you to do. Your Satan's actual job description is to hold you back from correcting your cocoon. And he will do that, she will do that tooth and nail. So that's something I think that's very relevant.
And to build on Susan's point, they talk about like, what would the light do? Does the light need to go in and have an argument with my family about justice and fairness? The light is just the light, right? The light's just going to show up as the light. And like, thinking about what would that do in that space instead, which to Susan's point, like, it doesn't necessarily make you feel better right away. Like, oh, I'm just going to be like the light. Like, don't we all wish we could be like that all the time? Right. But like, just what does the light need? And I have a very similar situation to yours, Kristen, when, I had family, my mother had passed. And my stepdad, whatever, he just, things did not go right. And I know we've talked about this, and he sent me a bunch of beautiful things from my mother. And like 6 months later, texted me and said he wanted it all back. So I have, nothing, right? So I had to send everything back that was so nothing, but there's almost like a sense of freedom in not having it, that like, it's just, there's energy attached to it. And I don't want that negative energy in my space. Like that give take energy, the what's mine, what's yours. And like, there's a freedom that comes with not having it, because now I can just experience it, my mother, for the beauty and what it is, and not an attachment. And I'm not putting this on now, it's saying it's attachment. It's attachment to like a thing, a ring or an earring, or like a thing that she had or wore, or like, I can just experience her in a different way, a more expansive way. But that did not happen immediately. And I know, I think I have multiple conversations, because you guys have coached me both about like what happened in that circumstance. I didn't know it, but like turning into like, what would the light do in that situation? Right. My ego at the beginning was pissed.
Yeah.
Like, how dare you? She's my mother. Like, and how dare you? You don't have no right. But there's a to the other side of that. Like, it's a bigger, I got a bigger gift. It was more meaningful in the long run than any little thing I could have had of hers. So
yeah. I mean, and ultimately that's what it comes down to. I think these are just things, right? Like in that particular situation, they're just things. I think what, and you guys can tell me what the Kabbalah would say in the situation. I think the harder thing for me was the feeling of dishonesty about things were not transparent. I was told it was going to go one way, and then it went a completely different way. And in that process, there was also character attacks towards me, like diminishing. I mean, basically blaming me for things that I didn't do. When there's no proof that anybody else didn't do them either, kind of thing. Instead, I felt very much, here we go back into justice again, very much like what happened to innocent until proven guilty. Now it's guilty until proven innocent, even though I have no control over that happening.
And here's something that's very next level. They don't talk a lot about shadow work in Kabbalah, but I think Satan really fits into this. Like, when you see something that you feel this intense anger about that is happening to you, right? It's the judgment of, well, they are this, right? So they are Kristen, how would you describe, like, when you feel like you are being blamed for things that that you didn't feel like are justified that you do. So when you look at them, what do you say? They are being what?
Accusatory, judge. I mean,
they're being accusatory, right? And so taking that, and I think this is the really painful part that is a part of this, is, okay, where am I accusatory? I am accusatory. And taking ownership of that. I am accusatory. I am judgmental. Where does that show up? Maybe not in this exact situation, but definitely in other situations. And where does that show up? So I think that it's about mirroring. It's about what's happening and then holding up in the mirror, or holding up the mirror and saying, okay, well then, how am I like that?
Yes. Yeah. No, that's a very good point, because I think it's not always in the same situation, but typically the things that we find about other people that rub us the wrong way, a lot of times that's just the things about ourselves that we don't like about ourselves. Let's talk about star chart readings. So basically this goes back to season 1. I had a guest on, Danielle Yardeni, who is a Kabbalah astrologer. I had her on the podcast, had a star chart reading with her before we did the podcast episode, and then promptly turned around after the star chart reading to tell Elaine and Susan, oh my gosh, you need to experience this, because it not only nailed me to a T, which was a little bit like scary, but good scary, because it explained so much about like, oh, okay, this is why I am like I am. Like, it makes sense to me now. But it also looks at like where your cocoon might lie based on your star chart. But part of that is like, she can look back and see what you were in your previous life, and then look at what you chose for this life. And it's like, just by that choice alone, what were you trying to correct. So like I was a Pisces in my previous life, which is all up in the head in the clouds and there are no rules and just very loosey goosey. And she's like, so no wonder you picked Virgo, which is very controlled, very regulated, very like organized, and things, there are rules and there are protocols and they need to be followed. You needed that groundedness because in your previous incarnation, you were all over the place, right? So there were several things in the star chart reading that were just like mind blowing. But I'm just wondering from your readings, what were the things that stuck out to you? And especially now that you're studying Kabbalah, because I think all of us did this before we'd ever kind of jumped into the Kabbalah boat.
So my reading with Danielle was, I think, 2 years ago now. So I don't remember a lot about it, partially because I have had 2 other star charts since then. So I'm really into astrology, y'all. So, well, I remember, by the way, the first thing that she said was I feel like I've read this chart before because Kristen's chart and mine were born on the same day, not the same year, but the same day, and we're very, very similar. Our charts are really similar. But I will say with my star charts, it was, oh God, they were so powerful. And it was just exactly what you said, like, how can you know so much about me just by, reading where the stars were when, the moment that I was born. And, I got one of the charts that got read was a business chart, and he was saying, you are meant to run a business. You're meant to have a lot of employees. And, the way you're going to be making money is by showing your face. Like there was all of this stuff that he was saying that made a lot of sense to me. That just kind of it also made me understand why it is that Kabbalah came into my life when it did, because one of the things he said was the spiritual work is going to play out through your business. And I can see that, and I can see why that is. And as soon as I can, work on this tikkun a little bit more, then I will, be able to move forward a little bit. But there was just so much, like, so many aha moments. And there was a lot of, I am someone who needs reason. Feels a lot of comfort in reason, in things being explained a certain way, like I'm very Virgo. I like things laid out a certain way. I like order and structure and all those kinds of things. And what the charts did and the information I got from them was it helped me to see the order of it all. It gave me reason and made me go like, okay, well, now I get it. I get why all of these things, why I am this way, why certain things show up in my life the way that they do, and how it is that I need to overcome them. It's, it's not a predictor. It's not saying, it's not like, okay, in 5 months you are going to do like, it's not anything about that. It's about helping you understand the structure of your life and what you can do with that. It's giving you information to move forward. And I would get a star chart every month if I could. I love them.
It's interesting that you're like in your star chart reading, because that was something that Danielle had said to me. And at the time I didn't really do anything with it. But she's like, your transformation is going to come through your writing. And I didn't really think of anything. I told, she's like, are you writing? I was like, well, I write in my journal every day. I just never really thought about like, are you writing? Until last year it kind of came in, and it was like, I felt more the impetus to write a book. I felt more of the impetus to write on a consistent basis, just not my journal, but just to start writing other things. So I've been playing around with Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, where you do morning pages, which is basically just vomit writing, but it's good to get you in the practice of like sitting down for 30 minutes or 45 minutes every day, and then just like getting into that habit, which then led into like sessions of like 1 hour a day. It has been transformational. It has been cathartic in that sense. I don't think anything that was in the star chart, none of it was like, at this point in time, or in 2 years, you're going to meet this person, or in 2 years, your business is going to be successful. No, it was very like amorphous and like general, but you had like some sort of sense of direction of like which way to go. Like there was a little bit of clarity on like which path to start kind of going down to shed more light on your like the life path, I guess, in a sense. What about for you, Susan?
My reading was so profoundly mind-blowing for me. And I would say the main themes that still just live with me every day. I am a Cancer, for whatever it means to everybody. I'm a Cancer sun, Cancer moon, and a Scorpio rising, which means I'm water signs all over the place, right? So I'm all about, so what she had said to me was, the first thing she said to me actually was, you are a channel and you were put on this earth to be a channel. And that was very much resonating with me. Knowing basically throughout the trajectory of my career, I was an American Sign Language interpreter. Now I am a coach. I am a constant channel, and that is how I even function. And so my ability to also mirror other people and connect with other people, it's almost clairvoyant a little bit for me. And so she said, you picked the parents and you picked the environment that you are to be in because you wanted to be surrounded by earth people and
Earth
people
person.
who value logic. Well, what's funny about that, Kristen and Elaine, my friends.
And Rachel. Rachel is also a Virgo. You've got 3 Virgos
Yeah.
on this call.
Oh,
Yeah.
man. And I don't know Rachel as well, but we're definitely getting there. So I was also, I think, meant to meet you because you are earth people, but at the same time, you are very, very spiritual and you very much are also channelers. And so I have grown up feeling a lot of shame around my way of thinking, my way of being a channel. And certainly as a kid, I could never have described what that is. All I just knew was, man, I was born to this family who, I'm just the black sheep. I'm not like these people. Am I adopted? And even in adulthood and my husband, I talk to him about all this. He is an earth person. Like I am drawn to them. And she says, because I am here to actually figure out how to self-validate and to actually live in my own authenticity. But what shows up for me in my behavior is looking for the next thing to validate me. Right. So it's like, I'm going to get a next certification or I'm going to get a next degree or a next thing, because that thing is going to validate me, especially when I come from background or a family who says that that's important and that logic is so important. Right. So I am actually here. And this is like my deepest concept is, how do I develop my own comfort level in who I am authentically and really truly living through that. So that's what resonated from my reading. And I've carried that ever since the day I had that reading.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Can I also say just, because just when it comes to astrology within Kabbalah and all of that, for some parents, let's say they'll have a child and then they'll get their child's chart reading done. So, I mean, and obviously it's for the parent. It's not like they're sending the baby. They're like, this is, but, and a lot of time, and one of the reasons they do that is to understand what part they are supposed to play in their kid's life, but also to understand how to communicate with them. Okay, well, this is their sun, this is their rising, this is their moon. Like, these are the different things these are the different ways that they communicate, and the way they kind of will probably walk through the world. Like, it's not predictive. Again, it's not saying your child is going to be X, Y, and Z, like this profession is going to go to this, like nothing like that. But it's like, who is this person and how can you best communicate and interact with them? And so again, like I said, like it's almost kind of like a roadmap to aid in connection. To again, aid in connection with yourself and aid in connection with the people around you. So it's just like, when people are going out on a date and they're like, so what's your sign? Right. So it should not be like, oh, you're a Scorpio. Forget it. No, thank you. Like it's not supposed to be about that. It's supposed to like, okay, well, how how should we communicate? What's the best way? Like all of that kind of thing. It's just kind of giving you a little bit of an overview of who that person is, but it's not supposed to be used as a weapon as to whether or not to give you permission to act a certain way.
Right.
or to treat people or to judge people in a certain way. I had a cousin the other day who wrote something in our cousin chat. I shouldn't say that, but anyway, there's somebody in my family who wrote something in a cousin chat, whatever. And she was like, she said something really rude. And she was like, well, I'm an Aries and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, that doesn't give you a reason to be an asshole. Like, it's not, I'm a Virgo. Virgos tend to be very judgmental. That doesn't make it okay. It's meant to be something they overcome, right? So it's one of the beautiful things that I find about astrology, and especially in Kabbalah. It's just, again, it's a roadmap. It helps you to communicate, it helps you to connect with yourself and with others, and it's just really cool.
Yeah.
So.
I think, one thing in my star chart reading that she nailed this right out of the gate. And it was like, once she'd said this, I was like, okay, this is going to get super interesting, because she just hit it. She was like, you have so out of 12 houses, 8, I have earth in 8 houses. And she's like, so that's a lot of earth. She's like, which can get really heavy. And she's like, so for you, that can show up as like states of melancholy. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, do you just put the word to it that I haven't been able to put to this? I have gone through these phases of melancholy my whole entire life, where it's like, even when things were like at their best and you felt like you were, at a high point in life, there's still this melancholic feel to it, that it's like, that the only way that I can appreciate this is because I know the heaviness of the depths that are the opposite of it. And I always kind of took it as like a bad thing until I started reading Susan Cain's Bittersweet, which was a game changer for me, in the sense that it's like, no, there are people who are very melancholic. But I felt like there was something wrong with me my whole life. I'm like, why am I always like, why are things so heavy? And why do I keep going through these like phases like this? And it actually ties into like when the times of year when it typically happens is because of the star chart, like where things are in alignment to each other. And it was like, oh gosh, okay, this makes so much more sense. I'm not broken. This is, and it's there for a reason. And she's like, you have to figure out why it's there. And she's like, I can tell you this, that the only kind of like, I wouldn't even say necessarily fix, but almost an antidote to this is to surround yourself with more people who are air. And she's like, because air is light, air will lift you. She's like, so find the people in your life who are air signs and spend time with them, because that's going to keep you out of those melancholic states. Totally works, right? Like as soon as you meet people and you're like, what's your sign? Oh, you're an air person. Guess what? You're my new best friend, because I need more air in my life.
This makes me think about, like, I'm surrounded by a lot of earth and water, and she told me I need a lot more air too. So I need to get on that. Also, by the way, lots of earth in my chart, just like you. This is why she was, I have Virgo sun, Taurus moon, and Pisces rising. And then I have a stellium in Virgo, and I have, was it a stellium in Taurus? And then, which means you have 3 planets in the same sign, and what, like, so much, there was so much earth. And that made a lot of sense, because I can really, it is heavy. I don't experience the melancholy quite in the same way you do, but for me, I am so weighed down in the practical things. And it's so much so practicality and also stability.
Yes.
These are 2 things that are so important to me that it's so hard for me sometimes to take risks. And I have done that many times in my life. I have just kind of jumped, without a net or what have you. But I have to overcome that. But oh my God, can it weigh me down like nobody's business?
Yeah.
And so
do you find that you focus on like the minutia of the day-to-day life instead of being able to look at the big picture of things?
So much. And actually, I got that in one of my star charts, my last one. He said, you are so concerned about the small little details. Like you need the 30,000 foot view. Like you need to pan out and really see what it is that you want. Not even the next 5 years, 10 years, like the next 30 years. Like what is it that you want? What do you want it to look like? Like you're just so focused on the small things that it keeps you from moving anywhere. And so this is when I'm feeling something like, let me go back to my reading, like, cause I took, notes and all of that. It's just so helpful. And now you're reminding me of things that he told me. So I need to go back. So.
Yes. So I guess kind of the last question that I would have for you guys around this. What would you say is the greatest gift that Kabbalah has given you?
A greater sense of self-awareness. I believe I had it before, and I had an understanding of self-awareness before, but I don't believe I had this capacity to take ownership the way that I do now.
Mhm.
And that's been truly profound. Again, it has reduced my anxiety too. And that it puts me very much in choice. And I also appreciate the fact that as I kind of unfold some of these layers, right? And for me, the righteous indignation has been a bit of the low-hanging fruit. It was almost the easiest thing for me to go for. And as I get closer to the core, which is self-validation, I can see what those layers are, and I can see them peeling off, and then I can look at the next thing, but not look at the next thing as a, hey, vey, I've got one more thing to figure out, right? Like, oh, yay, right. This is another opportunity for me to up level my soul.
Mm.
And I see it as such. Like, I am working every day to up level my soul. Like, it's amazing to think about it in that way. So I think that's what it's done for me.
I definitely echo Susan on that. The self-awareness piece. It's given me more integrity and with myself, like honesty with myself and honesty in a kind of way with other people as well, to live in more integrity. It's given me intentionality, being very aware of like who I am and how I'm showing up. I am far less angry, upset. It takes me a lot. I have a long string. If you're going to get me angry, it takes, and like, even then it doesn't happen. Like, it's just really created more intentionality and mindfulness in my life of who I am. And then one big concept that I've taken from Kabbalah, and I think it's really, is like starting to build certainty in who I am as a human being, and belief in self, and not the hallmark version of certainty, like the, like it is what it is, or, the kind of the certain, like, just like deep certainty that within that I'm doing all the right things in the right way, and I'm making the most, and I am practicing integrity and intentionality and showing up as the best version of myself. And with that it's all going to be okay, no matter what comes my way. We're going to make it through it. And that, to Susan's point, that anxiety piece for me, severe postpartum anxiety, has like, it's still there, but like in no way where it has ever been. And I think with that certainty, that's helped a lot. So it's given me those three things: integrity, intentionality, and certainty.
Love that. Elaine?
I think he gave me grace. And grace in the sense of, I didn't necessarily have a problem holding myself accountable, but I did it too much. I was so hard on myself, and I very much just blamed everything on myself to a degree that it was just bringing me down, feeling less than, in lots of comparing and all of that. And it gave me some grace. And I talked about the perspective and everything, and understanding I'm supposed to be where I am, and this is what I'm meant to overcome. One of the things I think David Guillaume had said in Kabbalah one is, or one of the Kabbalists that I took was, that one of the gifts that we're given in life is the ability to overcome, not the ability to overcome, like that we are here to overcome. And understanding that, and seeing what the trials have been and the tribulations and all of that in my life, it's giving me some grace to understand you did what you could in those moments with the tools that you had, and you did great, and here you are, and now you're even better, and even more, and understand that going forward, you're still going to do the best that you can in those situations, but you can also have the tools to elevate and, and be more, using the things that you have learned. So he's given me grace.
I love that.
I'd be interested, Kristen, your answer.
I mean, I've really just kind of started to get into it. So but I would say that probably the biggest gift, I mean, I agree, the self-awareness, right? Like as soon as you learn, pause, what a pleasure, you start paying more attention to when you are reactive, and you start noticing just how reactive you are to so many things. I think for me, it's given me a peace of mind. And this actually just came from one of the sessions last night. I'm actually getting a little bit emotional. Where he talked about being able to connect with people that we've lost in our lives. But in order to get to that point that you can do that, it's like you have to be in the light so that they can connect with you. So it's like you have to do the spiritual work on yourself to get to a place where they can connect with you. I think just even knowing that that's a possibility was huge for me. Absolutely huge.
Yeah, it really is. I think when you get to Kabbalah too, they talk about reincarnation and like the more depth of what you're talking about, but that is beautiful, right?
Yeah.
You have to be like the light in order to connect, right?
Yep. It's 100% true. I also got a little bit of comfort because when people were people were asking if like you can come back as a dog or a bird or, you know, whatever. And he's like, yeah, if you come back as a dog, like that's a lower level incarnation, you know? And it's like, but the people come back in dogs to help their owners with their cocoons. That guy right there, 120% reactive. I know that there's things that he shows me every day that I'm like, oh, I need to work on that. Okay. So that's the other gift that I got out of that. So Rachel, I've already asked you this question at the end of your 4-part series. So now it's Elaine and Susan's turn. I've been asking this question to all of the guests at the end of each episode. If I were to offer you the phrase to thrive in life, what comes up for you?
Like in order to thrive in life?
Either that or whatever comes up.
In order to thrive in life, you must have the capacity to look inward and to be accepting for what you find. But not only that, from that place of acceptance, also move forward in a way that is going to help you grow and taking that action. So it goes from awareness to action. And if you are able to do that successfully, I think that you will reach your potential. I think the potential that you are meant to reach in this life.
What came up for me is, and it's going to sound corny. It is a little bit, but that's all right. To thrive in life is to love oneself. And I say that because I have felt for a long time that so many of my issues or my challenges or the belief, all of that would almost magically go away if I just really truly loved myself to like the core of my being, right? All of the judgment of myself, of others, all of the blocks that I have, all of the resentment, and it all comes down to how I feel about myself and how I project that onto others. And it's, you know, obviously the journey of my life. It's probably the journey of all of our lives, but I always felt like if I could just really get, and I'm working on it, right? Oh my God, I'm miles away from where I was even just a few years ago. But the more I work toward that, the more I feel like I can really, truly thrive just being totally accepting of myself and who I am.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, you guys, this has been fun, and hopefully we can bring the 4 of us back together for another woo-woo conversation at some point in time. Maybe it's about crystals. I don't know. I keep saying too that I'm like, now that I'm going to be close to Sedona, like we just all need to go sit in the vortex together and have a girls trip.
Sign me up.
Yes.
Let's do it.
I think the next podcast episode that we all four do together should be in the energetic vortex. And
Yes,
that's my vote.
it's a great idea.
Yes.
I just got to figure out how to get equipment up there, but it's a challenge I'm willing to accept. I feel
And then
like
we
I
can
do
write
it.
off
I
the trip.
believe in you, Kristen. I believe in you 100%.
And then we can
do anything and get anything anywhere.
Yeah.
It's you.
And then we can have a reason to write off the trip. There you have it.
Yes.
It's a win
Yes.
all around.
It's a business trip, ladies. It's a business
That's
trip.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks you guys for taking the time to come on today, for sharing your experiences and your knowledge of Kabbalah. I think it's really important to kind of talk about this stuff. I think, like we all shared just different definitions of what spirituality meant to us. And I think there's so many things about Kabbalah, you're right, that are practical that we can just take and put into our everyday lives. But I just hope that the listeners gained today an opening to look into something that has been transformational, I think, for all four of us. I'm excited to continue on this journey and continue on it with you ladies.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thanks, Kristen.
guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.